As we're creating incredibly reusable components, in this lecture we're going to go through to understand how do the spread features work in React and in ES6 and in JSX in general. Let's jump right into it where we'll learn what spread is, how to use it in JSX, and how to use it in ES6. Alrighty, we're definitely getting close. Let's go ahead and before we make things dynamic, let's go right back into our code editor, and I'm just going to find an empty space here to talk about some more fun things that are new in ES6. Beautiful. So we add our hey function. Let's just go ahead here and just add more. All right, so let's say we have a function, and in our function, or even more than that, let's say that we basically want to add a lot of digits together. And we have here this add function. Now, historically, add numbers. How about that? Now, the problem is with our add numbers function is we don't want to have a set amount of elements that come in. We could send it as an array, but if we send it in as an array, and then let's say we do a console log, and we call add numbers, and we send in, let's say, 10 and 10. Okay, so we send 2, that's easy. If I send in an array, not that hard, but then I have to use an array, which kind of is less fun. Now, in ES5, there was a property that is called arguments, which was very nice. And with this arguments, if I go ahead here and I return our arguments, and I just go ahead and run this. And by the way, let me just go ahead here for a second. Not in our footer, and never mind. I want to delete some of those traces that we have so we can take better look at it, but let me just add here some extra noise so we could spot it more easily. So we could see that our arguments is returned back, and we could see that we have a lot of stuff in this arguments method. And if I look into that, first of all, it's you know, I can't let me just do a toString if I could. I don't think it does two strings. Yes, no, it's in R. You can't see it, unfortunately. So basically, I would have to go like one by one and send it in, but we're not going to do that. Let's look at how we do it in ES6. Now, in ES6, a really cool way is you just type 3 dots and then args, or props, or whatever you want to call it, really. This is just any variable name. And by typing your 3 dots and then that, what is actually going to happen is it's going to return back as a type of array, you could say, or a built-in type of array, which will give you direct access to that array information if you wanted to. Or in our case, I could go ahead and do a for let arg in args console.log arg and return, let's just return 0 for a second. And if we take a peek at here, we'll see that now we could go through argument by argument, or I could go for of, and then I would get the actual numbers. So by getting the actual numbers inside of that loop, I could go ahead and now say, okay, so let me just create here a let, right? And I'm going to call it total. And initially its total is equals 0. And then I'm going to go into my total and add into that total the arg. And then I'll just go ahead and send our arguments total back. And we should get our 20. Beautiful. That's exactly the value. And if I go ahead here and just send your 3, 2, 30, 10, 5, doesn't really matter. It will add up the numbers and give me that perfect number. So arguments is an incredibly useful logic set. And I want to show you just one more thing that you could do with this logic. So how about in a situation that we want to add numbers and duplicate? So let's say I'm going to create a function and I'm going to call it dup first by total of rest. Now, obviously, this is a silly function name, and obviously, this is not that logical. But really, in this situation, what do I want? I want to separate the first argument and turn that into be the duplicator of all the connection of all the rest of the values. In this situation, what I would want to do is I could go ahead and go through the process of these args, but instead of that, well, on top of that, I could say, okay, so the first one, so it's going to be like, let's say this is A, I'm going to call it, and then I'm going to type here 1, 2, 3 args. Now, I could have put a few of these properties out, so now if I go ahead here and I console log A, if I don't have an error here, and I have a small error, and that's because I didn't put here a comma. I thought I need a comma. I wasn't 100% sure. And if it refreshes now, we'll see that now we're getting, oh, we're never calling it, right? So let's go ahead and call that method instead, dup first by total of rest. And if we do that, we'll see, okay, so we're getting that first value, beautiful. The next thing I want to do is I want to send these arguments to this add number, so I could do something that already we could have done in ES5 previously. So I'm going to call add numbers, but instead of calling it directly, I'm going to call the apply, and I'm going to send it the actual args that are left. So I'm going to send it the stuff that we actually want to send for our add numbers, passing it over like a hot potato. Now, by doing that, what I've done is I've actually got the value back. And if it recompiles, oh, here we go, 57. Last but not least, all that's left for me to do is I'm just going to return here the value of a times the value that comes back from applying the value of add numbers, and I've got myself the value of the duplicate of the first total of the rest. And through that, we've learned how to work with the spread properties. Really, really cool stuff. Now, before we wrap things up, let's just see that it works. And we see here that 570. Wonderful. Let's go back into our footer and use this logic. And I'll show you how do you use spread inside of JSX. Now, in JSX, if you just find our footer elements somewhere down below here we go. I'm going to go ahead and just delete this value of this title bin. And I'm going to open and close a round bracket just like all the times before. Only this time, I'm going to type 1, 2, 3 dots, just like with a regular function spread, and then I'm going to type the variable name or object that I want to send as the properties. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say, okay, so our model, if we take a look at our client that we're sending in for the footer, this is the structure. So I want to go to the array's first position of our footer model, which is called data. So let's go ahead. So I'm going to go to props, props dot data. And I want to go to the first item. So I'm basically sending the first item in our props. Now, technically, everything here should continue working. So if I go ahead here, because in my text footer, it's expecting title and content. So it's really breaking it out and sending it as individual items. And if I check it out, we'll see that now we have our location. Notice how we have here a BR, so we're going to have to figure out a solution for it because it's rendering it as basic text and not as an actual BR. Next, also, we're going to want to send it for the item that is another text one, which we know the third one is a text one as well. So here we go. Let's send it also for our third item or our second item in the array, second position 0, 1, 2. And if we go ahead and check that, we'll see that now we're sending in that value as well. But do we have here an error? Nope, no error. But our data, interesting that we're not getting our body here. Is it because it's not sending in, or it's because, let's check in our inspector to see if the actual data is being sent in. So container, row, we want our third item. And in our third item, we can see that we have an empty paragraph. On contrary to the first item that our content is going through, if we take a peek, let's take a peek at our client data to see why is that. Content, that would do it. Content, save. And if we go back in there and refresh, we'll see that now our content comes in. And that really leads us to our next topic that we're going to talk in the next lecture. We got here a bug, but it was really, really hard for us to discover that bug, although it wasn't hard for us because our application is small. But as our goal is to create reusable components, they're not incredibly reusable if we don't have a way to tell developers, hey, there's a problem with the data that you're sending in. And that's exactly the topic that we're going to be covering in the next lecture. In this lecture, we learned how to use spread in ES6 and JSX. In the next lecture, we're going to talk about how do you validate your properties and how do you do it in the development environment using built-in validations that exist inside of every single React component.